Hello class, today we're taking a look at solving some multiplication and division problems that involve fractions. The first things we have are two pretty easy, pretty basic word problems, and for these word problems we want to write a fraction multiplication or division equation. And so we want to remember that multiplication means that you are starting with smaller groups and you're counting all of those groups together, whereas in division you're starting with a total amount and you're splitting it up into smaller groups. So if we think about our class sells 15 cases of chocolates for a fundraiser, and each student needs to sell 3/8 of a case, we want to know how many students are in the class. And so the idea is we're starting with a group of 15 cases, and 3/8 is going to one student, and 3/8 is going to another student, and 3/8 is going to another student, and so on and so forth. And what we're doing is we're splitting up our 15 into groups of 3/8. So we're going to go ahead and say that we have 15 split into groups of 3/8, and so that's going to be 15 divided by 3/8. Now, of course, we want an equation, and an equation has an equal sign and an answer. So let's work out what 15 divided by 3/8 would be. We're going to write our 15 as 15 over 1, and we're going to use our multiply by the reciprocal trick. So keep your first fraction, change divide to multiply, and flip the second fraction to make the reciprocal. 15 and 3 simplified by 3. That'll give us just 1s on the bottom. 15 divided by 3 is 5, and 5 times 8 is 40. So we'll say 15 divided by 3 is 40, and there are 40 students in the class. And if you think about that, 40 groups, each selling 3/8 of a case, would in fact make 15 total cases being sold. On the other hand, in question B, we have a tiler working on a condo tower, needs 3/5 of a can of glue to finish each bathroom. How many cans of glue will he need to do an entire floor? So of course we know that he's got 3/5 in this room, another 3/5 in this room, another 3/5 in this room, and so on and so forth. And so this is going to be 15 groups of 3/5, and 15 groups of 3/5 is equal to 15 times 3 over 5. Again, simplifying our 15 and our 5, we're going to have 3 times 3, which is 9. And so we'll answer they would need 9 cans of glue. For our multiplication or division equation with an answer for each diagram, these definitely are pretty tricky, so you want to know your models pretty well in order to be able to match them up. In the case of question A, we're starting with 3 whole rectangles filled in, so we're going to be starting with our 3, and we are splitting these rectangles up. Now we can't say 2 equal groups because then these parts of the rectangles would have to be included in our green groups there, and they are not. So we can't say divided into 2 equal groups. What we can say is that we're dividing them into groups of parts. And so if we split these into groups of parts, well, there's 5 parts in each group, and each part is okay, so 3 divided by groups of 5/4. So 3 wholes split up into groups of 5/4. For our quotient, because again we want an equation with an answer, we have 2 full groups, and then we have these 2 out of 5 needed for the next group. So we'll have the mixed number 2 and 2/5 as our quotient. In question B, this is going to be a fraction multiplication equation. For our columns, we are filling 1, 2, 3 of the columns, and there are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 total columns. So for our columns, we have 3 out of 8. And we're going to multiply that by our rows. There are 2 out of 5 rows. And overall, our solution is going to be our overlap. So there are 6 cells in overlap out of how many total cells in this entire thing? Well, it's an 8 by 5, so 40 cells in total. For question D, we want to think about what we're starting with. So we are starting with 3/5, 3 out of 5 columns. Now, we can't say that we're dividing this into half, because that would mean that we'd be reorganizing that into another drawing. We don't see that other drawing, and so we know we are not going to be dividing by a fraction. What we are doing is we're cutting this into two equal groups, and the result is how much is in one group. And so we're going to go ahead and say that we have 3/10 in each group. So with those ones, those are obviously ones that you need to know your models a little bit closely for to be able to recognize the kind of general format of it prior to filling in your numbers. For question C, we've got two groups and then in each group is 3/5. So this will be 2 times 3/5, which makes 6/5 in total. Taking a look at question 3, these are just straight up calculate each product or quotient, so these should be pretty straightforward now. Of course, we want to look for our rewrite tricks as we work to make our work easy. Our rule for dividing is to multiply by the reciprocal, so we'll keep our first fraction, we'll change divide to multiply, and we'll flip our second fraction to make it its reciprocal. I do notice some simplification I can do at this stage, so 16 and 2 are both even numbers, so I'll divide out that common factor. And 3 and 18 are both multiples of 3, so I'll divide out that common factor of 3. 16 divided by 2 gives me 8 on top, 2 divided by 2 gives me 1 on the bottom, and then 18 divided by 3 gives me 6, and 3 divided by 3 gives me 1. So 6 over 8 times 1 over 1 is 6 over 8, and we'll simplify that further by dividing by 2 to get 4/3. In question B, it's just multiplication, so there's no flipping required. I do see that I have some simplification I can do within this left-hand fraction, so 30 and 35 both can divide by 5 to give me 6/7. And then I still would have pretty big numbers to work with here, so I want to look for more simplification, and 14 and 7 are both multiples of 7, so I'm going to further simplify those by dividing out that common factor of 7. That's going to give me 2/25 times my 6/1. And I don't think I can make that any simpler in any way. So 2 times 6 is 12, and 25 times 1 is 25. And I know since there was no other common factors that cancel out, that there's no simplification I can do in my answer either. In the case of question C, I'm going to start by using my multiply by the reciprocal trick. So 8/30 stays the same, divide changes to multiply, and 16 and over 6 for my flipped reciprocal fraction. I do see I can do some simplification. There's lots of different ways we can do this, but we're going to do this within each fraction for a start. So I'm going to divide the top and bottom of this fraction by 2 to give me 4/15. And then I will divide the top and bottom of the second fraction also by 2 to give me 8/3. Now again, I don't think there's any further simplification we can do here, so we'll just multiply top by top and bottom by bottom. And there shouldn't be any additional simplification that's possible at this stage, since there wasn't any simplification possible over here. Okay, in question D, we're going to first off rewrite our whole number as itself over 1. Then we're going to use our multiply by the reciprocal trick. So 15/27 stays the same, divide changes to multiply, and 6/1 flips to 1/6. Next, I'm going to do some simplification. I notice that 15 and 27 are both multiples of 3. So I'll simplify that down to 5/9 times 1/6. And I don't think there's any further simplification we can do, so we'll just multiply top times top and bottom times bottom. And 9 times 6 is 54. And that's going to be as simple as we get. So again, just looking for those rewrite tricks as you work to keep your multiplications and your simplifications as small as possible. In question 4, this is kind of the main part of this assignment. We're looking to be able to solve these equations. And we remember that to solve an equation, you need to undo whatever operation is being done to the unknown. And in each of these questions, we're either going to have multiplication or division of our unknown. So in question A, we've got our box here, and it is being multiplied by 2/3. To undo multiplication by 2/3, we're going to divide both sides of the equation by 2/3. 2/3 times and 2/3 divide on the left side of the equal sign, of course, cancels out. So we've got our box equals our 10/12 divided by 2/3, and now we need to complete that calculation. So our 10/12 divided by 2/3 is going to become 10/12 times 3/2 by our multiply by the reciprocal rule. There's a few different ways we could simplify that. We could simplify our fraction 10/12, but I'm going to go ahead and choose to divide out my common factor of 2 here and my common factor of 3 here. And that'll give me 5 over 4 times 1 over 1. And that'll be just 5 over 4 in simplest form. So that tells me that my box is the number 5 over 4. Question B is very similar. Right now my box is being multiplied by 2 over 3. The opposite of multiplying by 2 over 3 is dividing by 2 over 3. And of course that cancels out on that side of the equal sign. In order to do that division, I'm going to flip and multiply. So 1/5 stays the same, divide changes to multiply, and 3 over 2 is my reciprocal of 2 over 3. And now I'll do that multiplication, so 1 times 3 and 5 times 2 gives me a value of my box is 3 over 10. In question C, similar to before, we're going to undo this multiplication by 3 by dividing by 3. And of course our 3 times and our 3 divide will cancel out. On the other side, we'll have 6/5, and instead of dividing by 3 over 1, we're going to flip and multiply, so multiply by 1 over 3. I'm going to choose to divide out my common factor of 3 here, and that will leave me with a 2 on the top and a 1 on the bottom. And so I'll have 2 over 5 times 1 over 1, which is just 2 over 5 for the value of my box. For question D, we are going to undo the division here. The opposite of dividing by 3 over 2 is multiplying by 3 over 2. And of course, we'll do that to both sides of the equal sign. Divide and multiply cancel out, leaving us with just our box on the right side of our equal sign. And on the other side, we have the calculation 7 over 9 times 3 over 2. I'm going to go ahead and divide out my common factor of 3, and that'll give me 7 over 3 times 1 over 2 for the value of my box. And then I'll do that calculation. 7 times 1 on top, 3 times 2 on the bottom. So my box is the value 7 over 6. Question E, I'm again going to undo this division by changing it to, using multiplication. So the opposite of dividing by 2/3 is multiplying by 2/3. And of course our divide and multiply cancel out on that side of the equation. We get our box is equal to 7 over 8 times 2 over 3. The simplification I think we can do here is divide out our common factor of 2. And that'll give us 7 over 4 times 1 over 3. And that'll be 7 over 12, and that's our simplest form of our answer. Question F, we're again going to undo that division by using the opposite operation, which is multiplication. So we'll multiply both sides by 3 over 2 to undo dividing by 3 over 2. Our box is going to be 4 times 3 over 2. Remember that 4 is really 4 over 1, and we'll do that multiplication here. 4 times 3 is 12, and 1 times 2 is 2. Of course, we're going to simplify. 12 divided by 2 in simplest form is just 6. So the value of our box is 6. In question G, we're going to undo our division by multiplying. So we'll multiply both sides by 5. We get our box is equal to 3 over 8 times 5 over 1. I don't think there's any simplification or anything we can do there. So it'll just be 3 times 5 is 15 on top. 8 times 1 is 8. And that will be the simplest form of our box. And then question H and question I are a little bit trickier. In this case, we want to think about our 6/8 is being divided by our box. So our box is kind of like on the bottom of a fraction. And so this is kind of similar to our ratios unit, where we really have 6 over 8 as a value over our unknown is equal to 2 over 1. And so in order to solve this out, we're actually going to want to cross multiply to get rid of our box being on the bottom. So I get 6 over 8 is equal to 2 of our box. Then we'll have to divide both sides by 2 to undo that multiplication. So we'll do our 6 over 8 divide by 2 over 1 is equal to our box. And we'll need to flip and multiply. So 6 over 8 times 1 over 2 will give us 3 over 8 in simplest form for the value of our box. So that one's a little bit trickier, applying that idea of your cross multiplication as well. Similar thing going on in question I. So what we really have in question I is 4/15 over 1 is equal to 12 over 5 over box. We're going to cross multiply to solve that out. So we're going to get 4/15 times our box is equal to 12/5 times 1. And then we'll have to divide both sides by 4/15 to get our box. And so we'll get our box is 12 over 5 multiplying by the reciprocal, 15 over 4. We're going to do some simplification here. And that will give us our 12 divided by 4 is 3, 5 divided by 5 is 1, 15 divided by 5 is 3, 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 3 times 3 is 9 for our box. Okay, in each of those you can of course check yourself by actually doing the calculation. So here, for example, we think our box is 9, so let's do 12/5 divided by 9, and let's see if we get our 4/15. So in order to do that division, we're going to write 9 as 9 over 1, and we'll flip and multiply. We're going to simplify out our common factor of 3 here, and that'll give us 4 over 5 times 1 over 3. 4 times 1 is 4, and 5 times 3 is 15, and that is indeed the solution that we wanted for this equation. The last bit is our challenge. We want to use some skills from a whole bunch of different units together to complete some calculations that would be pretty hard to do using decimals, or impossible to do. So if you wanted to do 3 times 0.5 repeating, you can never complete this calculation if you're doing it by hand using decimals, because no matter how many digits of 0.5 repeating you write, there's going to be more digits past there. And so what we want to do is remember that a repeating decimal is that number over 9. So in this case, 0.5 repeating is 5 over 9 as a fraction. And this is quite an easy calculation to do. We're going to go ahead and divide out our common factor of 3, and we'll get 5 over 3 in exact form. In the case of 0.2 repeating, which is going to be 2 over 9, divided by 0.08 repeating, which is going to be 8 over 99, we're going to need to do our multiply by the reciprocal. So we're going to have 2 over 9 times 99 over 8. We're going to divide out some common factors, so let's divide out our common factor of 9 there, and our common factor of 2 here. And that'll give us 1 over 1 times 99 divided by 9 is 11, and 8 divided by 9 is 4, and that'll just be 11 over 4 in simplest form. So again, just applying some different skills from a few different units all together to be able to complete calculations that we couldn't really do using decimals. So I hope that has helped you with being able to solve problems using fraction, multiplication, and division.